one of the reasons why I talk against so-called equal education is the fact that education is the result, to a great extent, of what the student brings to the educational process. That it is the result of the intentionality of the student. That it is intentionality that makes the difference in what you get from education, not what is stated in the classroom. You see, so that a black student and a white student sitting in the same classroom, one intending to rule the world and master the world and control the world, gets a very different bit of information, a very different orientation from the same information that is given to the black student. The idea that your children are getting the same education as a white child, when their motivations are different, their values are different, where they want to go and what they want to do with the knowledge of difference is a fallacy. You can't have equal education with people who have different intentionalities. You see, it's the intentionality. Whether you intend to be a slave, whether you intend to be a servant, a second banana, subordinated, whether your highest goal is to work for white men or work for yourself, those things have effects on your memory, they have effect on your perception, on your understanding what you're reading, and upon how you apply what you read and know. And therefore, being in the same classroom, hearing the same thing, even getting the same A's is not getting you the same education. There is more to education than the handing out of information. It's memorization and regurgitation. The student makes the difference in what happens to education. And that student coming from a culture makes that difference as well, you see. And so we have to look at that. So then it is not so much that the white man writes it. It's not that as much as what you intend to do with it, you see. And you'd be surprised when you come in with that Afrocentric intention, and you come in with the intention to be liberated, when you come in as a man and mean not to be bossed by any other doggone man on this earth, you're going to get a whole different set of information out of the material. I'm telling you. You see? But if you want to depend on being liked and accepted and all of that, you're going to be, you're going to be even shy to talk about it. I don't want to talk about them people. They don't wear clothes. Some other kind of nonsense. No, man, these people have sophisticated philosophies, and they can represent many solutions. So then, what are we talking about? Regardless of the normalities and distinctions made, society still distinguishes between male and female, man and woman, no matter how you play it. Despite all the unisexism and, feminism and so forth, a woman marries a man, and a woman wants a man. You're not running out here, women, looking for a unisex, are you? You're looking for a man, and a man looks for a woman. And no matter how you play it, and no matter how it works, and this is not to degrade female equality and so forth, but there is still a distinction between these two, people, these two groups here, male and female. And we have to deal with that, and it's going to be with us for quite some time yet. And societies, all of them have figured out some way of what is appropriate behavior to these two people of the species. No matter how you play it. You can cover it up any way you feel like it, but it's still there. And so, manhood is something that is different from anatomy. And this is the thing you have to keep in mind about manhood. Manhood is a concept that must constantly be defined and restructured. You see, there must be a constant dialectic between men and women as to what a man is and as to what a woman is. It's key because you recognize the definition of what it means to be a man and a woman is the key to the adaptation and survival of people, of a people. It's not merely related to how you deal with each other in your own private home. It's related to the very survival of the race. And one thing you have to recognize about manhood, I think to a greater degree than womanhood, is that manhood is, on a certain level, is an artificial creation as such. In other words, there has to be something added. It is not enough for the man to come into the world with a penis. We don't just simply call a man simply because he has a penis and say, well, you know, he's a male, therefore he's a man. Because you see, to act like a man, be a man. You know, of course, if a man and having penis were coterminous, you can say, well, I am a man, I got a penis, you know. So what's the problem? No, but you hear even women say, act like a man, be a man. You see, there's something there that goes beyond the anatomy of maleness. There's something to be added on to. In fact, it becomes interesting when you look at the embryology of the human being, you know, and look within the first 7 weeks of fetal development and recognize that in the human fetus, there are both organ systems present in the body. And see, nature is very economical, you see. In a way, it has only one body. And the basic body is female, you see. And it's basically, you might say, bisexual. And so it doesn't waste its time making two separate bodies. It takes one and decides to go one way with it or go the other way with it. So you get a body that comes in that has both sets of glands in it. The Müllerian female glands and the Wolffian male glands in the same body. And it will be the presence of the male gonad, if it's to be a genetic male, that's going to determine in which direction that body is going to go in terms of its internal development. If if the testicle is there or testes are there during these first 2 months, then the first 7 weeks, and the testes releases the appropriate hormones. One being, of course, the androgens, or the male hormone. Another being what we call the Müllerian inhibiting hormone, because the Müllerian gland that's present in that bisexual body, if it were not inhibited by the male hormones, would then develop into parts of the female vagina, uterus, and the fallopian tubes. In fact, you get a hermaphroditic situation where this sometimes occurs, where sometimes the testicle operates only on one side of the body. So you may have then, in a sense, a half uterus and so forth on one side, with the male side on the other. The male gland then, the male hormones then inhibits the growth of the female side, and of course stimulates the development of the Wolffian glands, which develops into the vas deferens, the seminal vesicles, and the ejaculatory systems of the male, you see. So you can see here, in a sense, now if a genetic male, for some reasons, if a genetic male's body is not responsive to the androgens, then even though the body is a genetic male body, the body will actually develop along the female route. In other words, it literally reverts or stays female in its basic design and configuration. In other words, then, you need to add something to get the male. If nothing is added, you get the female body. And this deals, of course, with the internal sexual organs and systems. When you look at the external sexual organs and systems, you will see then that the external organs too develop from one organ, the genital tubercle on the outside. Both the female clitoris and the male penis will develop from the same bud. Both the lips of the female vagina, major and minor, will develop from the same basic slit, and what becomes the female lips will, in the male, becomes the scrotum sac for the testes. And so you can see then nature taking the same basic body and, depending on the genetic program, using and transforming that body to suit the genetic program as such. But again, you see an adding on a plus in terms of the male. If that male body, again, genetic male body, is not responsive to the androgens and so forth, even though it is genetically designed to do so, you'll find a body that will stay basically female in its configuration. I'm going through that to indicate then that perhaps coincidentally, we kind of have this situation even on the sociological, psychological level, you see. Whereas we tend to accept the womanness or femaleness of a woman based on her biological apparatus, we tend not to be so quick to accept the maleness or the manness of a man based on his biological equivalent. He has to add something to it. In other words, then, manhood is a created product. It is made and developed. That is why in every society, you're going to find males at some point taking out for special treatment. Not that females are not, but I'm speaking here of treatment, because in this culture, you see, we got a lot of people getting upset because when we're talking about educating the black males, the very idea that at some point they will be separate from black females frightens a lot of folk. I don't know why. If you talk about African tradition, you should be used to that concept. The black males being separated from black females for years at a time. I'll talk in a minute here about the Samburu. The black males stay separated from the females essentially for 12 years during their education. The Maasai, a similar separation in pace and time, and you can go from one African tribe and group to the other. The African male is separated so that he can be taught the appropriate behavior to the survival of the group and the society, and taught how to relate to women. You see, we'll come back to that in a second too. One of the major problems with this society is that men and women are not prepared to live with each other. You send your children to school, they learn math, and they learn science, and they learn all this other stuff, and they learn everything but the very basic things that makes people happy. How to live one with the other. How to be happy one with the other. No courses in family. No courses on what it means to be a husband, or what it means to be a wife. No courses on how do you get along and resolve problems and issues within your family. No courses in terms of community relations and practice in community relations. And then you wonder why the society is so disorganized and destroyed, you see. But the older systems had the wisdom. They knew that you just couldn't throw men and women together without any training, without any preparation, and say, good luck, you see. And yet here this so-called advanced society will teach everything but what it takes for people to live together. Advanced. This is regression. That's why the divorce rate is so bad. The family situation is the way it is, and so forth. You must prepare men to live with women. And sometimes the best preparation requires that they be separated for a while so you can have some honest conversation and deal with each other in honesty. You know, men and women are like white folk and black folk. You can see the whole psychology of black people change when white folk come into the room. They get uptight, they get embarrassed, you know, we don't want to put the laundry out, you know, the whole thing. We want to look the best. You know, I was looking at this, speaking of Shahrazad Ali show there, this woman stood up, this black woman, during the show, and said, you know, something like, black folk, y'all act nice. Now remember, white America is watching. You know, let's be on our best behavior, you know. So we can't have an honest discussion or, you know, deep discussion because white folk are watching. And this often happens, of course, when you have men around women at certain points. You know, we gotta maintain our masculine ego. You know, we gotta, so it's difficult often for us to be honest and relate to each other honestly and deal with some issues because we are defensive about our image in front of women, as we need be, and vice versa. So in order to engage in the honest education of the male, there are times when males need to be together and deal with each other straightforwardly. And men do the best job of making men. Yes, and this has to be dealt with. Just as women do the best one with making women, ladies and gentlemen. And at some point, the boy is made into a man by men. And we have to bring that back into our equation if we are to survive as people. So manhood is not a given. It must be developed. And the development of the manhood ideal is not just a chauvinistic idea. The development of the manhood ideal has to be imposed on men. And men had to conform to that ideal whether they like it or not. Yeah, that's a part of it. You see, I mentioned here, I think a couple of lectures back, when I say, we talk about man being warlike. A lot of people say, man is aggressive, he's warlike, and so forth. And we have to remind you that most men are not naturally warlike. You see, you have to draft them into the army. Yeah, you have to make them go to war. They just don't run to the army. If they ran to the army, you wouldn't have to draft them. Most men under combat don't even fight. Many soldiers under combat don't even fire. They have special officers who hang in the back to run the men back up to the lines. Yeah, contrary to all your myths and all this other stuff, because we like to create that all of us are brave. All of us are ready to give our lives. Come on. Doesn't happen that way. You see, some of the old-time armies, literally the men were beaten into battle. Yeah. In other words, a good officer knows that you have got to be more frightened of him than you are of the enemy. That's right, because if you weren't, you run over him and run back in the back when the time got hard. Yes. In other words, then, and most men would like to be home with their wives and their families and around the farm and the whole bit, rather than out in the cold and starving and doing all the things men have to do. Because war is not a pretty game. It may be made to look good, when Stallone is, spraying bullets all over the place. And that's what, of course, gets a lot of American people in a lot of trouble looking at these stupid movies. I'm going to kill them all, That ain't the way it works out. War is hell. It's disgusting. People get hurt. People get killed. People get maimed. People get brutalized. People are used and abused and destroyed. Not only the soldier himself, his family, and the community, and other things are destroyed. War is not a playtime activity. And most men, if they can avoid it, don't want to go in it. So, yet, the nation must be what? Defended. The race must be saved. The children must be fed. The wives must be protected. And sometimes that requires what? War. That requires the ability for a man to defend his race, his family, his children. Sometimes it requires stealing. Yeah, that's what it's about. Because to a great extent, that's what war is about. Taking away from somebody what they have. We glorify it, don't we? We make it a big deal. It's not the big deal, it seems. Of course, again, we're deceived by words, aren't we? You see, the white man deceives his thievery behind the word what? War. He deceives the fact that he runs the greatest mafia operation in the world behind the words national interest. You see, and a lot of us are caught up with the words. And he deceives the fact that South America and Central America is his territory, the United States territory, and it's our territory, and we have the right to exploit it any way we feel like it, and the Russians and everybody else better what? Stay out. And if you try to get in our special territory, and never mind what the people have to say about it, they don't have a damn thing to say about it. You know, it doesn't matter what the Central American South, it doesn't matter that the Nicaraguans want to, you know, elect the Sandinistas, or that the Chileans wanted to put Allende in office, or that the Grenadians wanted to put, you know, yeah, in the office. No, this is our territory. The people have nothing to say. How different is that then from the crack dealer who says, South Queens, this is what? Our territory, and everybody else stays out. And the people say, we don't want any of you in there. Shut up, you ain't got nothing to say about it. And if you object, we're going to do what? Get you. But you see, we are willing to see the criminality there and the gangsterism there. But we don't see the criminality and gangsterism, you see, in this country saying Central and South America is what? Our sphere of influence. What do you mean sphere of influence? You see, and we collect from this group of people, and we make them pay what? Protection. And those people who don't agree with what we are doing, we're going to put an insurrectionary army in there and destroy them. Or, as in Panama, we'll go in and do it ourselves. And this is what it's about. And what do they mean by national interests? Or like as what's his name says, Bush, our way of what? Life. The life to which we have become what? Accustomed. Which requires that we stay as subordinated people. And he's letting then Saddam Hussein know that we're used to living it up, man. Having more than we can eat. You know, just consuming all the world's resources and so forth. But I'd be damned if we're going to let you have control of your own resources, man. No way. We're not going to do it. And we're going to have to fight you to do it. And on a certain basic level, this is in part what manhood and peoplehood is about. Are the people to voluntarily starve and die? Or are the men to go out and get what is needed for the survival of their people? Or are we going to let another people come in and take everything we have so that our children can starve and die? Or are the men going to stand up and defend what they have? This is part of what manhood is about, you understand? And this is why the man has to be especially psyched up and indoctrinated and trained. This is why manhood is not a mere chauvinistic definition. It is a social definition. It is supremely related to the people and to the survival of a people. It is not merely a haughty game that men play. In fact, it's a game that many men wish they didn't have to play. But they recognize that they must play it. Because a part of manhood also is a sense of duty. And a part of manhood is the willingness to sacrifice oneself in the interest of one's people and in the interest of one's folk. And that requires the stamina and the skill and the commitment and the duty and the willingness to put up with a lot of nonsense and hardship and so forth to see that that is the case. And that requires then the training of boys, and they have no choice about it. They must be set up and trained to do it, because they not only live for themselves, they must live for the race and live for the group. Because without the race and without the group, there is no self. And this requires certain disciplines, then you see. Now, one of the ones I recommend that you read about here is the Sambaru that Gilmore talks about here. And their image of what it means to be a man, to be a worthy man, you see. With the heavy emphasis on economic self-sufficiency and productivity. You have to recognize that in the older systems, the definition of manhood was tied up with productivity. With this Sambaru, a man is a man that owns something, that is not working for another man. That's the ideal. As I ask many of our young men today, how can you accept the definition that a man means to be independent and then see the ultimate goal of your life as working for a white man? It's a contradiction. It's a contradiction. You cannot see that as the end point of your life if you define manhood in terms of independence. If you define manhood in terms of what? Self-control, self-determination. You can't do it. And then fall subject to the white man. That's why the very definition of yourself as a man requires the overthrow of the white man in this world today. You cannot be a full man and be subject to rulership by white men. That's a contradiction in terms. That's why you got to move the black boy beyond going to school just for jobs. He's going to school to remove this white man as his boss. Understand? Right. One of the major reasons why your children suffer in these schools is because we do not have transcendent goals. Goals that move beyond the individual's own desires and wishes. Understand? Education is a transcendent goal. It transcends the individual in that education is concerned ultimately with this ability of a people to survive and a transmitting to the next generation of what it takes to survive, you see. And therefore the education of the individual just does not stop with himself. It moves beyond the self. But when you make the end point of the education of your children merely jobs, then it becomes very difficult for you to motivate the child and understand why that child is really going to school, because it doesn't move beyond this. And of course, you see, the system likes to keep us at this point. There must be a transcendent reason that we're here. To own property. Now, this group of people, the Samburu, depend on cattle for their wealth. In fact, cattle is wealth. Goats, a few donkeys, and so forth, but mainly cattle. It's liquid capital. It is the basis of their prestige, the basis of their influence. And so, therefore, to be called a worthy elder or worthy man is to own and control one's own piece of land, or to control one's own herd, and to be no one's servant. This is the ideal of manhood for this group. This may involve then their having to rustle that cattle from some other people, because a young boy has got to establish himself as a man. That may involve taking back from other people. I know that hurts some of our moral sensitivities. But if it does hurt your moral sensitivity, remember where you got your morality from. Yeah. And who taught you your morality? You know, we don't look at that enough, and I have to remind people again and again that African people did not come into this country as Christians. Yeah. That's a very important point, as embarrassed as you want to be about a Christian, but you got to face it. Africans did not come in here worshiping Jesus. They came in with their own religions and backgrounds. Now, am I attacking your worship of Jesus? I'm not doing that. Keep Jesus, love him, he's real to you. I'm not dealing with that. Okay, because that's not the point of where I'm going at here. You see, the point that I'm trying to get at here is that you may not be worshiping Jesus for the same reason you were taught to worship Jesus. Okay, those are two different things. You understand what I'm trying to get at? In other words, you may be converted by a hypocritical preacher, a shyster minister, and come truly to believe in the reality of Jesus. I'm not questioning your belief in the reality of Jesus, but your belief in the reality of Jesus does not mean that shyster preacher is still not using your belief in the reality of Jesus to further his hypocritical program. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, he can take advantage of your innocent and pure belief to rook you, to exploit you, and to use you for your own purposes. That is why you have to go even beyond the pure belief in the reality of your God. Also, you have to also look at how is this so-called reality presented and for what reason it was presented. And when you must then ask the question, why did the white man teach the black man Christianity? What did he have to gain from that teaching? And you can believe me, if he thought teaching black people about Christ would defeat his dominance, he would not have taught you. You have to understand that. It's very important. And one of the reasons why he taught you this is so as soon as we talk about taking from him what he has taken from us, his morality pops up. Thou shalt not steal. You know? And so any taking from him, no matter the fact that he took it from you in the first place, you got to feel unentitled to what has already been taken from you. And a part of his moral teaching was to get you just in that state of mind so that you can't bring it upon yourself to take back what belongs to you. So that you can do two things. You cannot fight to get back what is yours. You can only fight for the exploited, as we are doing right over there in Saudi Arabia today. How many of those men over there and women can we get to turn the guns against the people who most abuse them? The moral system would jump right up and say, no, you can't do it. We see this kind of game going on. So then, if their wealth depends on cattle, they are taught how to rustle cattle. They are taught how to be brave. They must. They are given then initiation rites, which to many of us would appear to be cruel. Here are boys that are trained for manhood beginning around the age 12 or 10, a little earlier. And they're going to be in this training for about 12 years. And the first part of this training involves circumcision without anesthesia. And you can imagine what a 12, 14-year-old boy is going to feel when you are circumcising him. And he is told, if you twitch one muscle and make one cry, you will not be granted the title of man. In fact, we're going to ostracize you, and your whole family is ostracized and knocked out. And it's not only done by this group, but many other groups. And he must, and his male relatives are sitting right there looking at him. And the other people are looking at him and watching. And any flinching and movement is called to run. And he's lost. He can't continue from that point. He's out of the running right at that point. Cruel? Yes, on a certain level, perhaps we will say. But on another level, here's a man that's got to learn to live with what? Pain. He's got to learn not to be overcome by the fear of what? Pain. You see, he's got to learn how to face death and not what? Run. So it's not just a silly, primal, primitive ritual. It is deeply embedded into the very economic, political, and social life of the people themselves. And the boys then have to be trained to undertake this kind of life. In a world where there's great scarcity and where things must be achieved through competition, the male must be trained to compete. He must be trained to take risks because the life of the community, what? Depends on it. It's not just a game of male chauvinism. He must then, in a life, and we are in a competitive system, and we hear this all the time, don't we? A competitive system. How then are we going to live in a competitive system if we do not train our men to be what? Competitive. And to be competitive means to take risks, sometimes enormous risks. To be competitive means often to be able to withstand pain and to withstand the fear that threatens to overwhelm you. Being competitive means being enduring, persistent. And see, one of the problems you're going to find in many of our black children in school, that one of the things that defines their character is what we call the lack of persistence. The inability to stick with a problem, and to stick with a lesson, and so forth, until they master that lesson. To fall easily to frustration. But in order for us to be ruled, we must have children who give up at the first moment of frustration. Or men who must quit as soon as they run into rough territory. But the other men who want to rule must make it what? Rough. They got to. Or else they can't protect what they have. And so in order for you to take what they have from them, since it is a society of taking, you got to learn how to deal with what? The roughness. And this is what this thing is about. It's interesting to note that when you look at the black politicians, you hear this word, non-threatening politician. That's one of those new terms, right? Non-threatening. In other words, we will elect Negro politicians who don't threaten white folk and frighten white folk. So Dinkins and Wilder and Rice and yeah, and they got a guy here elected here, conservative, up there in Connecticut somewhere, Republican or something, right? Andrew Young, they're talking about the non-threatening black politician. Isn't that interesting? Non-threatening. And you know what that means. And what I quoted to you a while ago is a result of non-threatening black politicians and judges, black men and black people being destroyed. A man must be threatening, particularly to his enemies. If you don't frighten the enemies of the race, then the enemies are going to come in and take advantage of the race. And he must learn then to display his capacity to defend to the death his group and his principles and his people. And if possible, to frighten away his rivals and to frighten away those who threaten him. So anytime you get a group talking about electing non-threatening, black men, you're getting a group that's getting ready to be raped and taken. And that's one of the reasons why we have this parallelism between black men going to jail and the kind of problem we have and the election of non-threatening black politicians. Because no one is afraid to mess with their people and to deal with their people. So then we see then in the image of the Sambaru man that he is not only hard and is not only steadfast in terms of his own definition of manhood, but his steadfastness is an economical phenomenon as well, you see. Because in that manhood definition is productivity. In order to be a man, you must grow more cattle. You see, in order to be a man, you must conquer more territory and build yourself a farm or a ranch or this or that. Now, this is not only a building for that man as an individual. That is a building for whom? For his family, for his group, you see. So his role of manhood not only then is a chauvinistic definition of self, it is an economic, productive definition of self. Now, what would happen if we as black men would say, in order to be a man, we must own the economic systems of our neighborhood? That I don't feel like we are full men when we let Korean men, Arab men, and all of these white men and other people stay in the midst of our people and take the wealth of our people. How can we look ourselves in the eye and say that we are men? That's exactly my point. Turn right around, that's why you're getting people knocking women around and doing a lot of the things and knocking each other around. Because when you're afraid to face your enemy and deal with your enemy and define your manhood as a defeat of your enemy, then you're thrown back on yourself. And a great deal of black-on-black violence, whether it's black men against black men, or black men against white men, or black men against women, or black men against themselves in terms of destructive habits, such as addictions. It is a result of what? People who have surrendered to a certain cowardice and who have given up the thought that they can overthrow the white man and his rule, and have permitted themselves to fall in a state of despair and fear, and therefore now seek to soothe their despair and hurt masculine pride by then getting inebriated and high and finishing themselves off for the enemy, or overcompensating and destroying women and children in the same way, you see. So I hope you can begin to see that manhood involves much more than chauvinism, ladies and gentlemen. Am I able to get through here? Now, not only then, in order for the Sambaru to be a man, he must engage in self-denial. And that's a part of the deal too. One of the things the Sambaru boy does, at a certain point, he stands before his mother's and the women quarters and swears that from this point on, he will not eat any food seen by the married women. What is he saying? He's not going to eat any more of his mother's food. He's not going to eat any more of the food given by women. That means he hates women? Not at all. He's saying now, I'm getting ready to move from the position of consumer and taker into the position of what? Producer. You see? And no matter how tempting the food is, and no matter how, wonderful it is, and some of this food is their natural food and the food that they love very much, I'm going to deny myself this until I achieve the ability and the capacity to make it for myself, and now to feed my mother, other than being what? Fed by her. A whole different reversal. And that is a part of the manhood ritual. To move a boy who is a sucker of milk and eating at mother's breast and so forth, to move him into the role as producer. You see, we used to have that in our society too in the old days. And you used to hear a guy when he was young say, man, the first thing I'm going to do when I start making money is buy my mama a house. You don't hear that much anymore, do you? And I'm going to set my mama up, and I'm going to make her stop working, and the whole deal. We don't hear that, but I'm going to mama and see, can I get something to eat? A whole different ethos going on here. And yet, he is an American, Different thing. A part of that ceremony of the Sambaru and of the Maasai is that the boy cannot be a man until he kills his first oxen. And then he cuts that oxen and gives the biggest piece to his mother, you see. And what is he symbolizing again? I am now what? The producer and the provider. So as I shall show you later, you see, manhood, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, is a nurturing definition. Men are nurturers and givers to their society. It is only in this deteriorated definition of what it means to be a man, and only when we have let this oppression separate us from our tradition, that our men continue to be consumers and takers. It is only the absence of the knowledge of our culture that has permitted us to deteriorate to the point where we are today, you see, and taking in uncritically feminist philosophy to the point where we doubt and we're ashamed to say that we are men. You see, we got to get out of that. His worthiness comes not only from accumulating, and note this thing about the manhood here that's prevalent throughout many African systems. His worthiness comes not only from accumulating, but from lavish gifting during feasts. Manhood or masculinity is a kind of moral, invisible hand that guides the activities of self-respecting individuals toward the collective end of capital accumulation. What do we mean here? In other words, if you really want to be a big man, after you accumulate this property and the cattle and so forth, what do? You give it back. You give a big feast. You just feed people, you see. And the more you feed, and one of the things you really do is you be the one who eat the least at your feast. And the more you're able to make people eat more, and the less you eat, the more of a man you are, you see. And this is why you teach these boys, they're not going to eat until they kill their own cattle. And if they starve, so be it. What can I tell you? Because we can't afford you, you see. You demonstrate then your ability as a producer, you see. You demonstrate your ability to enter into self-denial, not because it, quote unquote, just makes you a man, but in making you a man, you feed the nation and you feed the people. This black man, you see, has been duped by this religion into hating money and hating wealth. And I try to tell black people, we are wealth-producing people. Where do we get this thing here of identifying with poverty? Where do we get this craziness of seeing poorness and goodness as the same thing? And seeing virtue in poverty? We have to get it from the other people. It doesn't make any sense. There's no greatness in being poor and poverty-stricken. In fact, there's great sin that flows out of poverty. Yeah. Look who hits you over the head. Rich folk? Are they the ones mugging you out here? No, poverty is not automatically virtue. But of course, you see, the other people, in order to rob us and keep us poor, makes us associate virtue and poverty, you see. And somehow we are not supposed to make money. You got a bunch of jokers around here, black people are not good accountants. Give it to the Jews. They know what to do with money. How the hell the Jews can outcount money more than you? Money is money. That's all. The Jew doesn't have any greater facility with money than you have. But I told you here some lectures ago, right, that the white man is no better manager of business than we are. What is his advantage? He only makes you what? Pay for his mistakes. Do you remember when I told you that back some time ago? Hasn't the S&L crisis shown you that? White man mismanaging the economy, destroying the systems, destroying the banks. Are they in jail? Are they paying back? No, we're going to pay for that. We're going to pay for that. But yet we have this myth, that they are better managers of business, that they're this and they're that, because we don't take time to see, because we have not received an African-centered education that can permit us to look through this nonsense and see what is right in front of our eyes. And we see the mismanagement of the economy all the time. Total mismanagement. Screwing up. But what happens? Well, we screwed it up this time. We're sorry, we got to put you off the job. Yeah, we got to furlough you. We got to make you pay more taxes. This is the game. This is what the game is about. No calling into question the leadership of the white male as a business person or financial person at all. In fact, we think he's even great now that he sits up and outlines how many jobs must be lost in the city and how many departments. He talks percentages and so forth, not realizing he's covering up his what? His failures. Oh, but isn't he magnificent, the way he lays out how many folk got to be fired and destroyed. Wow, I wonder if a black man could do that. Craziness. But that's the result of power. You make other people pay for your mistakes. And that's the result of weakness. You pay for the mistakes of others. And that's the way the game is set up. That's the reality of life, ladies and gentlemen. It's not pretty, but that's what it's about. That's why a man doesn't worry about being what? Pretty. He has to deal with the realities and the harsh realities that exist out here. And those realities are not beautiful. And therefore, he doesn't spend all his time primping and going through all of the changes, because his duty lies elsewhere. And he doesn't get his way in the world through seduction and through the other gates. He gets his way in the world through what? Power. Power and strength. The black man has been feminized by the white man. Yeah. Very much so. Integrationism is a feminist orientation. Let us marry the white man. Let us and the white man be as one. And once he sees that I'm his brother, that we are the same, there's no difference between us, even though we're black at 7 midnights. You can't see the difference. You can't see the difference, you know. You're not supposed to see that. You know? And of course, being one, he will now give all of his, share his wealth. That's the craziness that animates the assimilationist idea. Oh, don't worry about building the system yourself. Don't worry about constructing an economic system, a political system, and so forth. No, just marry the white man and you got it. It comes with the whole time. You know? Don't worry about having to fight and struggle to the death with this other person. Just marry them. Get them to like you. Get them to love you. Get them to see you as one with themselves. And you got it made. So then when you get that attitude, all you got to do is make yourself likable. You see? And you seduce them. You make them feel guilty. Ain't you sorry what you did to us? You know, we get into that. Oh, look at all this slavery you put us through. We're weak and broken. Don't you feel sorry? Give us something for it. You know? Yeah. Yeah. It ain't gonna work that way. Another thing for you Christian folk, and the other ones. We're not being prejudiced here. And the other ones. But there's a telling illustration of when the rich man comes to Jesus and says, "What must I do to be saved?" Jesus says, "Give all that money you stole back." And it's interesting what that paradigm represents, right? Now, those of us who are Christian, of course, see Jesus as God. Jesus is a God, right? Yeah, God. Isn't it interesting that this human being comes to God, looks God in the face, and when God tells him what to do, he says what? Screw you. Did he give his wealth back? No, he didn't. He went right on about his business. And then what did God say? It's as easy for a rich man to get into heaven as a camel to get through the eye of the needle. But the guy was still going with the money. Okay. Now, what am I saying to you then? If a rich man can look God in the face and say, "I ain't giving it back," what the hell you think he's going to tell you? Yeah. So you think through some guile and nonsense, you're going to rook this white man into giving you his wealth. You're out of your minds. I'm telling you. Through some moral suasion. Are you kidding? That's not the way it works in real life, ladies and gentlemen. Men defy God. And if they defy God, I'm sure as heck going to defy you. And if we're sitting around one day waiting for this white man to reach some kind of moral sainthood and share this wealth, you're going to be waiting forever. It's not going to happen. It's not going to go that way. Read your Bible carefully. Move beyond what the preacher tells you sometimes. You know, you've heard me with the Moses thing. Same thing with Moses. God promised him the land. Gets right there at the promised land. The God give him the key. Say, "Here, Moses, unlock the gate and go right on in. I promised it to you." Didn't do it. You go over there and do intelligence in that country. See how it's laid out and so forth. See where the army is. See how the cities are organized. Why are you going to do that? Because you're going to have to do what? Take it. Take it by war. Even though I have what? Promised it to you. You understand what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? Simply because something is promised doesn't mean you don't have to fight for it. And you see it in that Moses story. I promised you the land, and yet I'm not going to give it to you. You're going to have to fight for it. And you're familiar with how they were psyched out over there. Oh, we can't beat them. They're giants. They're invincible. Oh, we were better off under slavery. Take us back to Egypt. You know, they nearly hung Moses that night. Yeah. You know it. Screaming and hollering. Read the verse. They were screaming and hollering in the night. What can we do? And what happened? And the ones that were psyched out were condemned to die. They had to stay in the wilderness, stay in confusion, stay in madness, and die. And only those who believed the impossible and thought the impossible, that he is not invincible. The white man. You must understand this. The white man can be defeated, and defeated by black men. You understand? If you don't believe it, you're going to die in these gutters with crack up your nostrils, which is what's happening to a lot of us already. Those who've given up. Those who are afraid they can't change the world. Those who have not dared to challenge and put their lives on the line. But they end up dying anyway. Miserable, cowardly deaths. And not only do they end up dying themselves, which we wouldn't mind so much, they take a whole lot of other people with them and destroy a whole lot of other potential who can move us forward as a people, you see. Because they bought the idea that the man is invincible and that they cannot overcome him. And now they die in the wilderness of North America, around the world. Time. Okay, we're going to have to bring it here, but we have to understand then manhood and its relationship. So manhood is also related to generosity. In order for a man to be generous, he must accumulate. He must have something to give away. He must be trained then to get things. You see, he cannot be trained to be a dependent. He must be trained toward independence. When you see my book on the education of black children, you're going to see a whole list of cognitive styles that I'm going to talk about that have been made to characterize black children, and which is one of the reasons, which are some of the reasons why they have so much trouble in this educational system. You must understand that the imperialist mind operates on a very different set of values than the subjective mind, you see. And part of the major reasons we have problems in this school, we are in schools designed by imperialists for imperialists, and we are subject people in them. And we cannot fathom the kind of thinking that is projected in those schools. We cannot fathom why they teach what they teach, why they teach it the way they teach it, because we don't see in any way it being related to where we are and where we want to go. It isn't. It isn't. Those schools are designed to maintain their dominance, and that dominance must be maintained by particular ways of thinking, by particular ways of relating to each other, by particular ways of seeing the world, ladies and gentlemen. Now, unless you intend to be an imperialist yourself, or remove imperialists, the thought styles and approaches they are teaching in these schools make no sense. And you have difficulty what? Learning them and developing them. And that's the major part about, well, why am I learning mathematics? Well, why should I learn, to understand English very well? You see. Because you don't see it, no. if you don't see the power of the word and how the word is used, how the word is used in thinking, how the word is used by others, so that you can discern deception from truth and so forth. You see, that's why you're learning this. Not because you're trying to be like white folk. That's the last person you want to be like. You know? And not simply because you're trying to get a job, but because it is a part of your very capacity to defend yourself. If you can't understand intent behind the word, motivation behind the word, how a word is being used to manipulate consciousness and so forth, you will be victimized by those words. So you learn English, standard English and the other stuff as a way of self-defense and as a way of moving oneself out from under domination. This is what it's about, you see. And you'll see then that this imperialist mind is represented in the very structure of the schools themselves, all the way through. And they are represented in the very thought styles of the white middle class, in contrast even to the black middle class, and in particular to the black lower socioeconomic class. And so you get these differentiations, one being analytical thinking, the other one being relational thinking. I don't have time to explain these today. And you know, and you'll see one succeeds in school, the other one drops out. These people got it all figured out. Look in Hale Benson's book about the black child, and look at how they show the analytical thinker with high IQ, high success in school, so forth. The analytical thinker, high information and so forth, success in school. The relational thinker, high information, trouble in school. The relational thinker, low information, dropout, behavior problems, the whole thing. And yet, if you look at the nature of domination, you will see that that very thought style is inculcated by the very structure and nature of domination itself. And you'll see how it's built in. That's why you got to be conscious of it, or else you'll identify it with Negro culture. That's the way we think. We're intuitive. Yes, we're intuitive, but we are more than intuitive. We are intuitive plus. You see, we are spiritual. Yes, we are spiritual, but we are also analytical. You know, some of us want to back off in there. Well, you know, to be African is to be spiritual, to be intuitive, to be emotional, to be... Come on now, you got more than that in your head. And you have to use both of them for survival. And you have to learn which side is appropriate under various circumstances. You see, and you can't hide behind African intuitiveness while you're being destroyed. If it's necessary for us to learn how to think analytically and so forth, we must learn that style of thinking. Does it mean giving up the African intuition? Not at all. It means adding it on to African intuition and becoming more powerful than all the other one-sided people in the world. You see, a combining, you see, and a developing into a bimodal, both sides of the head kind of person, as against the one-sided white man and the one-sided other man there. You see, and this is what it's about. We don't reject, but you'll see these styles are built right in. Impulsive style against the reflective style. One that takes time and thinks, and the other one that just gives you the first answer that comes into the head. You got to be that way. But a part of manhood training, a major part of manhood is self-mastery. Yeah, that's one reason why he's going to take that cut and stand up to it. Master your pain. Master the overwhelming desire to run. Master the overwhelming desire to scream. You see, control it. Because if you are an impulsive type, you can't control your feelings. You're going to rape and rob your own people. You're going to consume your own people's productions and so forth. You're not going to take time to think out strategy so you can defend your people and defend your family and so forth, you see. You're going to then take in drugs because you're so impulsive. You don't take time to think. There's a direct connection between impulsive orientations and drug addictions. You see. What is culture? Culture is not merely a knowledge of song and dance and a knowledge of, the way we dress and behave. That's very superficial. Culture is a way of thinking